Hi, thanks for joining us for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. I'm Chris Cooper. Daffodils and tulips are early heralds of spring. Today we're going to talk about how to get the most from your spring blooming bulbs. Also, summer birds fly south for the winter, but other birds fly in to stay the winter. We'll talk about how to attract them to your yard. That's just ahead on the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South.
Production funding for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South is provided by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the Family Plot. I'm Chris Cooper. Joining me today is Joellen Diamond. Joellen is the Director of Landscape at the University of Memphis, and Miss Debbie Bruce will be joining me later. All right, Joellen. We're talking about those spring blooming plants, right?
Yes.
Tulips, right? So is this the appropriate time to talk about them?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Tulips happen to be the most popular spring bulb that's out there. Everybody, when you think of spring, you think of tulips.
Yes.
And so, yes, and think about it. They are bright and showy and a definite color contrast to what is going on in the winter. So it's a good welcoming of spring. So let's talk a little bit about them. And it is time to plant them now, you know, because of two reasons. They need cold for a biochemical reaction inside the bulb that will initiate a flower bloom to come up when the temperature gets warm.
How about that? Okay.
And the second reason why you need cold temperatures is cold temperatures also initiate root growth of the bulb, but then the bulb can start taking up water and nutrients to transform into a plant, and then ultimately the flower that blooms.
Right.
So the cold is needed for those two
need the
reasons.
cold weather. Huh?
Yeah.
How about that?
Cold reasons for that. Now, as much as we love tulips, guess what else loves tulips?
Probably deer, right?
Deer, and what else?
And those other rodents that are out there for the most part?
Oh yeah.
That's right.
You know, so that kind of makes it just very exotic, very desirable plant because everybody likes it, including the animals.
Yeah.
And I've heard some people say that the deer will wait just until they start blooming and then eat them like candies.
Yeah.
So you know, it's a problem. But you can protect them. Now, my dad made cages like this to bury in the ground and put soil in and plant the tulips in here and then finish wiring it back down. And this kept the rodents from eating them. Now, it didn't help for deer, but we didn't have a deer problem.
Okay.
So, but we also had a rodent problem. But if I had a deer problem, you could take chicken wire and make a dome over them for when they bloom. So that could help with both of those. Or you can plant them like I do in containers near my house, and deer and rodents don't get into the containers. So you can try that. But there are other bulbs that you can use.
So there are options.
There are options.
Other options, okay.
There's some bulbs that deer do not like, and those are crocus, hyacinths, and muscari. Deer don't like those, but the rodents can like those also. But some that are both deer and rodent resistant are alliums, the onions. Of course, you know, they don't want to eat the onions. There's the daffodils, the narcissus, the jonquils, you know, the 13 categories we've talked about before.
Sure, I remember.
Scilla, Camassia. The Camassia is actually a native to the Southwest U.S. and it kind of naturalizes.
Okay.
It's real pretty when it blooms. So what do? The whole United States has different zones.
Sure.
And so you've got to check in the zone that you're in and make sure you're buying bulbs that fit that zone.
Right.
We're here in zone 7. So zones 5 through 7 are probably the easiest zones to plant any kind of bulb in.
Wow, easy.
Because we can plant them in the ground in the fall, October to December, and have enough cold to initiate both the bloom and the roots and the plant growth to come up in the spring naturally. So we just plant them once, we don't think about it again, they come up and bloom in the spring.
Yes.
So that's the easiest. Well, zone 4 and zone 3 also have bulbs that they can do that with, but there's less to choose from the colder it gets.
Gotcha.
So you've got to watch what zone you're in, because you're in 3 and 4. You've got to watch which bulbs you buy. But you can also put them in the refrigerator and take your bulbs and get them in October, put them in the refrigerator, and then in about then you wait until the spring starts to thaw, and then the ground will still be cold enough that when you plant them in the ground, then they'll naturally come up and bloom.
Gotcha.
But when you put them in the refrigerator, you've got to watch for the fruit you have in the refrigerator, especially apples, because they give off ethylene.
Ethylene gas,
and,
right.
and that will damage the bulbs from both rooting and blooming.
How about that? Okay.
So you got to make sure you watch that.
Yeah. Wouldn't have thought about that. Okay.
Yeah, so that's zone 3 through 7. Now we get into zone 8. And zone 8, it's an iffy thing. Tulips especially. Other bulbs, there are bulbs that are zoned that way that they can just plant in the ground directly and they will come up. But tulips, no, you have to have a cold treatment for tulips. So in zone 8, you put your tulips in the refrigerator again, start in October, and then they'll have their 12 to 14 weeks of cold to initiate the bloom, but the ground will be cold in January, but it won't. You most likely will not be frozen in zone 8, so they can go ahead and plant them in the ground, and that will initiate the roots, and then they can naturally come up.
Okay.
Well, now zones 9 and 10. 9 and 10 does not have enough cold temperatures to do either of those things. So basically you need to treat them like annuals, and you can buy them, you put them in a pot with some soil, put a plastic bag over them, make sure it's watered, and put them in your refrigerator, and then bring them out in the spring if you want to plant them, or any time, and then they'll bloom within 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay.
So they kind of use those as annual. That's about the only way you can get zone 9 and 10. Zones 9 and 10 can grow bulbs is if they put them inside and use them as an annual and have them in containers.
Wow. That's pretty good. Yeah, you ran the gamut on the zones.
Yeah,
I like that.
There's something to do in each different zone. Right. Now, it doesn't matter. You can force bulbs any time of the year you want, especially when they're available in the fall.
Okay.
And my mother taught me this. She took a can, just a vegetable can. She took a plastic bag, a rubber band, a hyacinth bulb, and she would plant it in here.
So you don't have to put that much soil in there,
No,
right?
just a little bit of soil for the roots.
Right.
Then you get enough soil in here
So we cover it up.
to cover the top.
Gotcha.
You leave a little bit of space. You make sure you water this. Now it doesn't have any drainage, so just make sure it's watered so it's wet. Then you put your plastic bag over it
How about that?
and your rubber band, and you have your little greenhouse.
It's a mini greenhouse.
Mini greenhouse, and you put this in the refrigerator. October is a good time to do that. November, you can do this. And then give it 12 to 14 weeks and bring it out, and you can give it as gifts. Usually you do this for Valentine's Day, so you take it out about 4 weeks before you want it to bloom and give it to somebody, and there's a gift.
How about that, Mom? That's pretty good. It's
Yeah.
pretty good. Now I'm gonna ask you this question.
Uh-huh.
Which way does the bulb go down?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We usually get that question, right?
We do get that question a lot. Here, we'll unfurl him and look at it.
Orientate that bulb there.
See this back down here? This is where the roots are.
Okay, good.
Down here, and the pointed top is where the stem comes out. So you're going to plant that down in the container like this.
Okay.
And bury it.
And bury it.
Yeah.
Mini greenhouse. I like
Mini
that.
greenhouse.
Wow, it actually does work. How
It
about
works
that?
really well.
All right, Joella, we appreciate that demonstration. We appreciate that good information about tulips as well. Deer eat just about anything, huh?
They do. Yeah.
Bad to know there's some bulbs that you can plant that are deer resistant. So that
There are quite a few.
Right. So thank you again.
You're welcome.
We're here with one of the fun elements of our home gardens, which are volunteer plants. This is a beautiful gourd which actually grew out of the compost pile, I believe. And so it's gorgeous climbing the fence, but the question that it brings up is, what exactly genetics does it have, right? And so that brings the question of, was this grown from a hybrid? How was it cross-pollinated? And so there are lots of times especially with different kinds of vining crops in our garden, when we can actually get cross-pollination. We could plant a hybrid seed that we know exactly what it is, and it will come true that first year. But if we save that seed, if it's cross-pollinated with something else, we may end up with something a little bit different the next few years. So seed saving can be fun, but we want to be sure that we know what pollinated it and what we're looking for the second year.
All right, Miss Debbie, let's talk a little bit about the kind of birds that we'll see in the winter.
Okay. Well, not only will we see our faithful residents like our cardinals, chickadees, tufted titmice, nuthatch, and on, but some of our winter residents are either on their way back or already here now.
Okay.
Birds such as your junco, many of your native sparrows, your sapsucker, the woodpecker family, okay, and some of our winter warblers will be here.
Okay.
So it's a good time to start developing a refuge for your winter birds and your residents right now.
Okay, yeah, we want folks to know that all the birds don't just leave.
That's
I mean,
right.
they're still hanging around.
That's
okay?
right.
Now, since they'll be hanging around, what do we need to feed them?
Well, first of all, start out with a clean feeder.
Okay, it makes sense.
We like to drink out of clean glasses.
Sure.
They like to eat out of clean utensils as well. So it's a good time before winter really sets in to clean your feeders.
Okay.
Clean them with a hot water solution and with some soap. Then rinse them with 9 parts of water and 1 part of bleach, and that's going to kill any of the bacteria that's lingering in there. Make sure your hardware systems are ready to go and your bird houses are cleaned out. And then it's time to start filling up those feeders. During the fall, we have a quieter time at the feeders, but when winter sets in, we have a lot of activity.
Okay.
Birds will form their feeding flocks in numbers. If one bird finds food, everybody's going to find food. So it's safety in numbers and good to have multiple eyes to find them. So you'll have more activity at the feeders. And you want to feed seed. Predominantly, seed is going to be most of your seed-eating songbirds.
Okay.
And birds are quite adept at finding food in nature. So before you even start to put your feeders out, when you're planting, think about things that are going to hold on to their fruits and their berries through the wintry months, such as your crab apples and your sumac, dogwoods, junipers, your viburnums. But it doesn't take long for all that to be depleted.
Sure.
So you can provide seed in loose seed in feeders, such as this cylinder feeder, or you can provide it in an open tray, which is fun because it doesn't restrict anyone then on the tray. You can provide seed such as your Niger seed mixed with crushed hearts of sunflower for your finches.
Okay.
Or you can do compressed seed cylinders like this one here or this little guy over here.
I think those are so neat.
Aren't those fun?
Yeah, those are fun.
And the birds really like them, and they're so easy to do. But what's really neat about it is the birds have to work at it. So it keeps your bird there longer so you can enjoy watching them. Another type of food that you can provide for the birds would be suet. And suet is actually rendered fat. We use beef fat in ours.
All right.
And we want high calories. But if you have trouble with squirrels, you want to go with the hot pepper.
How about that?
Squirrels don't like it, mammals don't like it, but your birds will love it. But you know, in nature, suet doesn't grow naturally like seeds do. So one way to help the birds discover your suet feeder is frost it with peanut butter and put just a few seeds in it, and then they'll identify it as a food source pretty regularly.
And the hot pepper doesn't bother the birds.
The birds seem to love it. Birds seem to love it. But if you are feeding the birds and you don't want to feed the squirrels, either go with the hot pepper suet, and we also have hot pepper seed cylinders that'll help.
Okay.
Something else you can feed to the birds would be your mealworms. Mealworms can be either fed as live or dried. And a good place to place these would be in a feeder near your bird bath.
Okay.
Because that way the birds will find them pretty regularly as well. And you might have a bowl of fruit on your counter at home you don't realize you could share with the birds, and that would be apples.
Okay.
Cardinals love apples, red-bellied woodpeckers, your mockingbirds. Take an apple and slice it or half it and put it on a feeder and watch what happens there.
Didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So what about water?
Water is so important. You know, when it's 95 degrees out,
Yes.
folks will think, oh, I need to put the water out for the birds. And they tend to forget when it's 25 degrees. But a clean bird is a warmer bird.
Okay.
Plus, they have to drink, just as we do every day. You can provide water in a dish, but when it's really freezing outside, then put a de-icer in it. That's an electrical unit that's going to turn on when the water reaches below, I think it's like 40 degrees, and it'll keep the water just de-iced. It's not going to make it a hot tub.
Okay, right.
But it'll keep it thawed out, because when you have frozen water everywhere and thirsty birds, you will not believe the activity you have on a bird bath with a de-icer in it.
Yeah, I can see them enjoying that.
They sure would.
That's for sure. All right. Now, while we have a little time left, let's talk about shelter.
Shelter's important. Landscape your yard for the birds in mind. That's the time of year in the winter when the leaves are off the trees, so it's easy to be seen by predators. So if you don't have a thicket or shrubs or that nearby for the birds to go inside when a predator comes by, whether it be a hawk or maybe a cat, which shouldn't be outside to begin with, then you can make a brush pile. If you're trimming those branches or find branches that have fallen on the ground, make a pile of branches. Or after Christmas, take a piece of rebar, stake it in the ground, and tie your Christmas tree to it after you discard it. And it'll be an area for the birds to get into. Put it near your feeder. It's a lot of fun, and you'll be surprised who will use it.
I think Wes is amazed by it as well.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Think about
That's a
that,
really good
because everybody
idea.
pretty much just throws them on, to the curb.
Well, wait till spring to throw it to the curb.
Right to the spring to do that. Okay. Wow. So again, some of those predators, hawks, if some cats, are there any other out there that people need to know about?
As far as predators during the day would be predominantly your hawks.
Just the hawk, okay.
They're going to watch your bird feeder.
Okay.
If you have
That's food.
a mourning dove sitting on here and a hawk nearby, your hawk will come in and grab the mourning dove.
Oh, okay.
And if there's somewhere shelter nearby where they can get to, or where they can sit and wait for their turn at the feeder or the bath, that would help.
Okay. Wow, Miss Debbie, thank you for that good information.
You're
We appreciate
welcome.
that.
You're welcome.
Wow, look at our oregano and how much it bloomed this year. And now all these blooms have turned into seed heads. And if you can see them, but if you just spread all this, that there's just lots of seeds here. Well, that's really nice, and I'll probably keep some of them, but we don't want that many seeds to come up in this garden, so we're going to cut these off at this time. And what I'm going to do is take off the whole stalk down to the green plant, because the green plant will stay evergreen in the winter here in Zone 7. So I just come in and cut them off at the place where they're coming out of the green. There. Now it's a nice evergreen mound for the winter.
All right, so here's a Q&A segment. You ready?
I'm ready.
These are great questions.
Yes.
All right, so let's go with the first viewer email. 6 years ago, we stratified some apricot and nectarine seeds and planted them. They have bloomed nicely the last few years with beautiful blossoms, but no signs of fruit yet. Will it ever bear fruit? Thank you. This is Andrew and Deb in Providence, Rhode Island.
Wonderful.
So how about that? Isn't that cool?
Yes, it
Providence,
is.
Rhode Island. All
That's
right.
good.
So will they ever bloom is the question.
Well, they're blooming, but will they fruit?
Yeah, will they fruit? Right.
Correct.
Right.
Will they
ever,
fruit?
Yeah, bear
Well,
fruit.
you know, they've got beautiful blooms on them, but I'm wondering if there's a pollination problem.
Same thing I wondered.
And I don't know exactly what the pollination problem could be. Maybe it's this, there's not enough pollinators in the area to
Right,
naturally
right.
pollinate them. Maybe they can go over and shake the shrub a little bit to see if the pollen can fall around on the others. I don't know if the weather has caused it, you know, but it seems to be a pollination problem because apricots are self-pollinating.
Right, exactly
So
right.
that's not the problem. It doesn't need another tree.
No.
Um,
And the same thing with nectarines.
Right.
Actually
It's
self-pollinated.
true. Yes. Yes. So, you know, I would suggest in Rhode Island, the University of Rhode Island, I think, has a publication about stone crops and other fruits, which this is a stone crop, that they can reference to see if they've got any ideas. And they could also call their local extension agent and see if they can come out and actually look at the trees and see if there's anything else that they can suggest.
Right, I would agree with that because again, we're not there, so we don't know the conditions.
Right.
Right. And they can find their publication on familyplotgarden.com. We'll
Very
have it
good.
on our website for them to
Yes.
see that. But again, they just want to know, will it ever bear fruit? So I want to make sure I get that clear. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It can, but there's something wrong.
Right.
And so we've got to figure out what that is in more depth.
Right, right. So we just think it needs to be pollinated.
I
Yeah,
think-
get those bees out there.
Yeah,
we need to get
maybe
more
they
bees
can
out
start
there.
beekeeping.
Maybe.
And
get a
then
beehive or
they'd have
something.
enough pollinators to
Yeah.
get fruit.
Okay. All right, but we definitely think it's a pollination problem, Mr. Andrew and Ms. Deb. So thank you much for that question. Rhode Island, pretty cool.
Neat.
All right, here's our next viewer email. Is this a beneficial bug? All right. This is not a beneficial bug.
Looks real mean, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
it does. Looks menacing, doesn't it? It's actually a leaf-footed nymph, which will be a leaf-footed bug at some point.
Yeah.
All right. And the reason why it's called leaf-footed is because on the back of its legs, it would have an attachment that looks like a leaf,
Oh, wow.
which is why it's called leaf-footed bug. They are plant feeders. They love fruits, vegetables, nuts, agronomic crops.
Yes.
They have piercing, sucking mouth parts.
Yeah, that's why sometimes you'll get on tomatoes or even green beans,
Exactly.
cucumbers, there's little spots on them.
Exactly. And same thing with your nuts, like your pecans and things like that. So they are a problem. So they are not a beneficial. And what you would need to do is get rid of those weeds. Of course, they like to
Weeds.
hide out in the weeds. Practice good sanitation,
Yes.
okay? Because they're going to try to overwinter in crop debris. So
Yeah.
leaf-footed nymph is what that is. It does look menacing. But that was a great picture, I thought.
It was a good picture.
All right, so thank you for that question. Here's our next viewer email. Is it true that peppers like dry soil? And this is Carolyn from Oakland, Tennessee. Interesting question though. Is it
Yes.
true that peppers like dry soil? Dry
Well,
soil.
not necessarily dry. They like hot weather,
Hot weather, yeah.
but not necessarily dry soil. In fact, dry soil can hinder fruit production. Really, what you would like is a more even moisture without it being too wet. Now,
Right.
you don't want peppers do not like to be wet.
Do not.
So that's probably what she's thinking about. So maybe, you know, a little bit of drying before you water it again. Make sure it really needs water.
Right.
But if you can keep a nice even moisture, it would be the best.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Nice uniform watering would be good. Yeah, you don't want dry soil. Yeah.
No.
Poor fruit set that you mentioned, and those immature fruits can drop because of dry soil.
Yeah.
So not dry soil, hot weather,
Hot weather.
not dry soil, Miss Carolyn. So thank you for that question. Here's our next viewer email. I found this plant growing in my flower garden. It has leaves like a corn stalk. What is it? And this is Phyllis in Louisville, Kentucky. Look at
Oh,
that, Louisville,
neat.
Kentucky. So nice picture,
It is.
Miss Phyllis. So we thank you for that. So, but what is it? It's not corn. What is it?
It's Milo.
It's Milo, grain sorghum.
Uh-huh.
That's what that is.
Yeah,
How about that?
and you know, it could have come from a bird feeder. Now, I don't know if she feeds birds, so it could have come up from that, or it could have been a bird who ate some bird seed somewhere and then deposited it in her yard. So,
Right. Yeah, it definitely could be.
It's probably from bird seed.
Okay. Yeah, the thing about Milo is actually it's used to feed livestock.
Yeah.
Right, I learned that from some of the our ag agents. So it's used to feed livestock. It resembles corn.
Yeah.
It has vegetative growth, similar to that of corn, and it actually contains a lot of protein and fat, which is why it's used for livestock feed.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So
Well, but the distinct top is what
Yeah.
gives it away, because those are what the seeds mature, and that's what's dried and goes into feed.
you're exactly right. I would keep it. Would you?
Yeah,
I
like
think
it.
it's pretty nice.
I mean,
think it's pretty nice.
it can dry. It'll be dried,
fine.
and then the birds can eat it.
That's right. Yeah. So it has a use. Okay.
Yes.
So there you go, Miss Phyllis. All right, here's our next viewer email. I have black stripes on my green beans. What is this, and can I still eat them? And this is Carrie from Bartlett, Tennessee. So what do you think?
Well, you know, you see that you can see the actual seed inside the beans because there's lumps on them. So I'm wondering if it's the end of the season, you know, a little bit of environmental problems here and there, and some of them are green, granted, but it might just be, you know, a tired plant or the end of the season or wait a little too long to pick or something like that. Probably when she cooks them, they'll all turn green. But I don't see anything wrong with them. What it is, like I said, I think it's just they're a little bit older, a little bit mature, end of the season type of problem. But
I would still eat them.
I would eat them.
And I think you and I did talk about this. You know, I tend to think it may be just a marking that's variety specific.
It could
because
be.
there are some varieties that have, because I'm thinking about the rattlesnake, you know, beans that have the little purplish looking markings on the pods. So it could be just a, you know, marking of that variety.
Could be.
Could be.
And again, when she cooks it, like the when they're the solid purple ones, when you cook them, they turn green. So it's still.
I would eat them.
I would eat them myself.
I would eat them. Scary. I would do that. We thank you for the question. All right, Jill, that was fun.
It was.
That was a good question. That was fun. Thank you. Remember, we love to hear from you. Send us an email or letter. The email address is familyplot@wkno.org, and the mailing address is Family Plot, 7151 Cherry Farms Road, Cordova, Tennessee 38016. Or you can go online to familyplotgarden.com. That's all we have time for today. Thanks for joining us. If you want to see how to plant bulbs or learn more about the 13 classes of daffodils, head on over to familyplotgarden.com. We have videos on both of those, plus more videos about attracting birds to your garden. Be sure to join us next week for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. Be safe.